Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hello, everybody. I am so excited today because I and my very special guest, who I will now reveal is my husband, Gil, are going to do a podcast together on dating. I wanted to have Gil on today because, not just because he's in a relationship with me, so somehow we're like masters of relationships because we're in a relationship together. I wanted to have him on because I actually think that he has one of the most unique perspectives on dating of anybody I have ever encountered.
Wow. That is high praise indeed.
No, it's really true. And you're going to hear it in how he talks about dating. I just think that he and you, as I'm talking to you, Boo, have such a perspective of radical authenticity and commitment to knowing oneself and knowing what one wants and being really open and authentic with the other person that I think would benefit so many people. And I think you need to hear what he has to say. So I will give one anecdote about Gil that I think explains why he's the perfect guest for this podcast. Gil and I met online really just about a decade ago. We're recording this at the end of September of 2022. We met in December of 2012. And we met online. We exchanged like 2 messages back and forth. And then he suggested that we have a phone conversation. So we did. And when we got on the phone, we basically both just said hello. And then literally the next thing Gil said to me was like, okay, so what's important to you in life? And I was just like, what? Because I had only done a little bit of online dating. I'd only been on a couple of other online dates. I'd been doing it for like maybe a month before I met him. And I'd also dated in general. I had never encountered anybody who would just leave before we knew anything about each other with what's important to you in life. In
fairness, we exchanged a couple of messages. So I think we shared some impressions, right? You had given me some thoughts about probably my profile, I assume. I know I had given you some thoughts about my profile, but yeah.
It was not an extensive back and forth. I remember thinking, okay, this guy goes to the call pretty quick. Yeah. And then on the call, he went to what was to a serious and meaningful pretty quick. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that phone conversation, but I just think that is so indicative of who Gil is, that he like wants to get to what's deep and important really fast, which I could not value more. So that's just like one of the reasons why he is here. And why I think he's really intelligent about dating.
Well, thank you, Boo. That's a very kind introduction. Yeah, I guess we'll get into a lot of this material as we answer people's questions. So let's just get into it. And hi, everyone. And I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited. I have sort of a monotone voice. It's just, I wish I didn't, but I kind of always sound a little bit, boring maybe. I don't know. But I have strong emotions and strong opinions, but I tend to have this kind of maybe monotone voice. But it doesn't mean I'm not excited to be here, because I'm very glad to be here.
That's a good caveat. I think because I spent so much time with you, I forget that might be the case, and I can see.
Yeah, you used to comment on it a lot, actually.
That's funny. I forget that. That's a good caveat because you are a very like emotive person.
And people have often accused me of being very calm, and I'm always shocked because there's a raging volcano inside me often, and then people are like, "Oh, Gil, you seem so calm." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" but it does make sense in hindsight when I listen to myself talk. But anyway, enough about me. Okay. You want to take it away?
So let's start. We've got a bunch of really interesting questions to answer today. So I'm going to read them and then we'll both give some thoughts on them. Okay. So this first one is from Alex. It's a question about the superficiality of dating apps and it sort of being a numbers game. Alex says, I'm in my early 30s and I've struggled with dating apps, in large part because I find them superficial and I don't or haven't yet found that I build genuine connections and rapport when meeting on an app. At the same time, dating can be narrowly focused down to a numbers game. More swipes equals more connections, equals more dates, equals being closer to finding someone you connect with. How can I overcome or navigate my dislike of the superficial nature of dating apps in order to go on better dates?
That's a great first question.
It's such a good first one. Okay. Yeah. So Gil and I agree. I thought maybe Gil should go first because he's like my podcast guest, but he suggested maybe I go first. So I just want to name that's why we're doing it. So I'm going to lead us off. I mean, the high level point for me, for Alex, and for anybody who's thinking about these questions is just, I think if you look for depth, you're so much more likely to find it. So I think it's like about making the choice to lead with depth at every part of the process from the profile. And I've worked with a bunch of clients on dating stuff, and I find that often even really thoughtful and deep people have online dating profiles that seem kind of generic and surface level, and they're not willing to show up in a more authentic way, which necessarily will turn some people off. Mm-hmm. And then it also applies to the actual dating process, which I can talk more about in a second. But yeah, that's like my first swing at it. What comes up for you in terms of this one?
Yeah, totally agree with everything you said. I should say we haven't been on online dating apps for obvious reasons in a long time. It is possible that maybe I've literally never used Tinder. I'm a little bit old for it because I think it existed at the time we were dating.
But it was a little more just like a hookup app, I think. When we were dating.
That was definitely the reputation it had. That's why I never really was interested in it. So maybe there is some truth to the apps now being more superficial, but my initial thought was actually, is it the apps that are superficial, or is it the way people are approaching them that is superficial? And kind of, along with what you said, Katie, I think it's only a numbers game once you've achieved truth in advertising. So once you've actually gotten serious with yourself about what you're really looking for, and hey, if you're at a phase of your life where you're looking for a hookup or just something casual or just, friends with benefits or whatever it is, that's cool. Just know that that's what you're doing and the results will, be commensurate with that approach. And if you're really serious about a relationship and you're serious about knowing who you are and knowing what you're looking for, then your profile should reflect that. And if it doesn't, then that's problem number one. So I think it's really about, are you actually telling people things that matter about yourself? Now, once you've done that, and I'm going to go back to that in a second, but once you've done that, then it's a numbers game. Because yes, of course, you can't guarantee that just because you've put yourself out there and you've shown up as yourself that, there's a lot of people in the world, but they may not all be living near you or may not be the right phase of life, etc. So.
And also one thing for here too, like in my experience, because I do still I literally will look at my clients' online dating profiles. You can strategically choose, for example, your app to pick an app that privileges more text. Some apps, only have space for answers to 2 questions, and you can only put the equivalent of like a tweet in there. That's just not an app that's going to privilege. That just seems anathema
to finding a serious person.
Yeah, so I think you want to sort of choose all of that carefully. And I've had a lot of clients who are like, oh, it's embarrassing to actually say what I want, or it's like embarrassing to reveal myself. So I think just like encouraging people to be like, no, share really authentically. But sorry, go.
Yeah. No, that's great. And again, as I said, this all presupposes you want to find like a serious relationship, because I don't think people are really complaining because there's not enough hookups out there, right? So all of these answers are geared towards more of that sort of interest. Well, I wanted to talk about sort of how when we met, it's okay to talk about which app it was, right?
Yeah.
So the now defunct website wasn't even an app at the time. It was called How About We? And for those who don't know, How About We was basically like the premise was your dating headline, your profile headline was a date idea, like how about we? And then you filled it in with go bowling or play chess or whatever, or go to a nightclub. And I don't think there's anything that special about the app. It just happened to be where we met. And my approach was, most women are not going to be compatible with me, and that's okay. I only need to find one woman. And so because I was serious and I did value being in a sort of deep committed relationship, that's what I was looking for, I purposefully put things in my profile which I knew would turn off a lot of people or make me seem boring. For example, I wrote there was a question there, a prompt that was like, oh, I hate places where, something like that. And I filled it out with, I hate places where it's so loud you can't even hear yourself talk, right? Because I did not want to date someone who loved going to loud bars and nightclubs where you can't hear yourself talk, because to me, the whole point of going out with someone is to get to know them. And I don't know, there's a bunch more things in there where like I knew I was going to seem kind of lame and boring, but because I wanted to meet someone who was introverted like me and someone who valued, deep conversations and certain other activities that lend themselves more to quiet spaces, there was no point in acting like I was this like fun, happy-go-lucky guy who just like wanted to go out and have a drink and have fun, because number one, that's not who I am, and that doesn't give the right kind of person the right information to know what kind of person I really am.
I think that's such a great point, because it comes down to this fundamental thing of allowing many people to be turned off by you.
Yeah.
Which we've already said, but I just think is so worth repeating. I think especially for women who I think it sounds like Alex is, I just think we can have a tendency to be so focused on the other person and like getting the other person to like us, and trying to like scoop up as many potential people interested in us so that we can choose among them. When I think it's more about, you showing up really honestly and asking, who do I like? And starting that sort of authentically from the beginning.
Right. And I think that's, again, it's sort of a distortion of the idea of the numbers game. If it's not a numbers, having as many potential people be interested in you is not what you want. You want maybe 3 or 4 people to be interested in you after they've seen, or, there's always going to be a gap between how we present ourselves to the world and how we are in our most unguarded moments, and that's fine. But once you've been as honest and authentic as you can about who you are and what you're looking for, you might only have a pool left of 3 or 4 people, but that's okay, because those are going to be your strongest contenders. And then it's a numbers game at that point, but a numbers game of 3 or 4 people is much different than like, oh, there's thousands of men in New York City that I might potentially be a match with. I mean, if you're someone who values a deep relationship and you value authenticity, you're not going to be a match for most of those men, because most of those men aren't going to be like that. Or maybe they could be, but they're not ready for that, because that's literally not how they're showing up right now.
No, I could not agree more. And I also want to say, because we've been talking a lot about sort of profiles and when you're on the apps, the other piece of this for me is when you're actually on some initial dates. The thing I always like to say, and this doesn't even apply just to dating, it also applies to making friends or other social interactions. Again, if you're looking for depth, you will find it. And that is in everything. That's in the types of questions you ask. If somebody tells you something about themselves, there's sort of like the surface level cocktail party response you can make to them. But there's also a moment where you can like really sit with what they've said and just ask them something that goes like a level deeper. Like, oh, wow, that sounds like it might have been really hard in this way, or like, and it doesn't even need to be a very intense question. It could also just be sort of energetically how you respond to them. You just like really let what they've said land in your body. It could just be like a sort of intonation. It's not about performing depth. It's about actually being deep with them. And that is all these sort of subtle ways. You could say the exact same words, but say them from a way of being, which is deeper, and you will take the conversation deeper. Mm-hmm. And not everybody can handle that, and that's totally fine. But there could be some people who might not have started there, but if you give the opening, they'll follow you. Yep. And you'll never find them unless you take it there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you might get lucky, but again, if you're trying to play a numbers game, you're increasing your odds significantly if you're sort of, that sort of tired old Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see in the world, like be the person you want to date, be the person who like people can open up with and have deep conversations with at the cocktail party. So.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, cool. Anything else you want to say about this one?
No, I think, ultimately all these questions kind of connect. So, a little bit from each question will also fill in the gaps in the other ones.
Okay.
And then at the end of the podcast, we'll have resolved everyone's problems.
All of their problems. Okay. Okay, so the next question is from Emmeline. It is, what are some strategies for figuring out if you should end a relationship? And Emmeline says, as someone who struggles with unhealthy attachment styles and a fear of commitment/anxiety, it can be difficult to figure out when I truly want to get out of a relationship versus when my anxiety is acting out. This is especially the case when I can't pinpoint anything about my partner that I rationally know will be a long-term compatibility issue. What are some strategies for separating the desire to run away caused by anxiety versus a legitimate desire to end a relationship? So the big question that I have when I had listening to Emmeline's question was this sort of high level question of like, does she, or does anybody, or anybody listening to this, do you know the source of the anxiety? Like, I hear this sort of like, I'm having this fear of commitment, or I have unhealthy attachment. But I think the first key is to literally just be like, what am I afraid of, or what's upsetting me, or, what's causing me to want to push them away? Like, how can I be as specific in my mind as possible about the problem here? I'll give a specific example for me. In college, I had a boyfriend, and there were some things that he would sometimes do that I didn't prefer. Like, I didn't feel like he was like being as responsive to me as I wanted, or like he was like sort of considering me in his plans in some ways, or like being as attentive to me as I wanted in certain ways. But I also was like terrible about communicating at that time. And I also like sort of felt like I wasn't allowed to ask for things, or maybe I didn't know how. So my strategy at that point was to, like, if I felt pushed away, to basically just push him away more, I think. Like, I just never told him how I felt at that time. And in retrospect, like, the more advanced thing to do is to be like, wow, I'm having all these feelings. Like, have a conversation about, like, I didn't like it when you did this thing. Like, I would prefer this in the future if possible. Is this, available to you? To have the conversation about, what the actual anxiety is with the person. Or if it feels like unknowable anxiety, like you're just feeling a bodily sensation of anxiety regarding the relationship, to have a conversation about that. Like, I just have anxiety about you and I can't even figure out what it's about, but just at least so, I think there's a groundedness to being able to, like, discuss it, and for them to at least know, when this person is showing up and you can feel sort of energetically that they're shaky, they kind of know, which I feel like is a kind of intense thing to suggest if that's not something you're used to doing, but I think can have sort of pretty useful effects. I don't know. That's my first pass. What are your thoughts, Gil?
Yeah, I'm on board with all of that. I have sort of a similar set of ideas that I kind of put into a little model that just came up for me, which is, the first thing is like, and again, this is just the model I came up with literally minutes ago, and if it doesn't resonate, that's fine. But the first thing is, do I want to be around this person? Because there are also cases where someone's just kind of not that into someone else, but for some reason they feel like they should be. Like, maybe they're like, oh, I don't know, he's really nice, or she's really nice, or they're fun, and they're sort of trying to rationalize why they should like this person more than they do. So part of it is, do you actually like this person that much? Like, do you want to be around them? And that's like the minimum floor. And that's pretty basic. If you don't actually want to be around them that much, then you're probably just not that into them. And that's not a very complex question. You should probably just, I don't know, keep dating or don't keep dating, but you should just be aware, you're not into them. But then if the answer is yes, you do want to be around this person, okay, are there issues with respecting boundaries? And I think this goes a little bit into what you were saying about your experience, that sometimes anxiety comes up, could be because of previous relationships, or could be because of the current relationship where there's some boundary that's not being respected. And I'm not saying, in your case, you mentioned, oh, they weren't including me in their plans. That doesn't sound like a boundary, but it is a sort of boundary. It's saying, like, you can't just, I don't want you to just make plans without me because that makes me feel like not, respected or cherished or whatever it is. So that's one reason that you might have for your anxiety. You like someone, but you don't feel safe in the relationship because you're not erecting boundaries, or if you are, they're not being respected. Now, if you decide that yes, you do have clear boundaries and they are being respected, and that's not the issue, then I would go to, again, something you said, Katie, which is, why not just share with this person? If you're in a relationship with them, or dating them is the early phase of a relationship, just talk to them. Tell them about how you're feeling. Tell them, I really like being around you. I really value you. Maybe if it's true for you in that moment, I love you. But I'm feeling these things, and I know I partially have to sort of figure them out, but I'd also like to see if we can figure it out together and have a conversation. And I think you need to test relationships. If you're serious about someone, you need to test the relationship with more than just trying to show up when you're feeling at your best. It doesn't mean projecting onto the other person. It doesn't mean loading up anxiety on the other person or having them be your only support person, but it does mean you got to you have to test how much the relationship can take. Can it take you sharing fears and vulnerabilities? And if it can't, then we get into this question of, is this the right relationship for me? You know, and so this is all, I guess, my answer to how do you know if you're supposed to stay or not stay in that relationship is like, if you're feeling like you like the person, they do respect boundaries. There isn't any kind of, you know, weird stuff where you feel unsafe around them, but then you're still having these questions, and just talk it out. And you may come to a point where you realize, oh, this isn't the right person for me, or, oh, this is the right person, but we need to do some work because I'm not feeling, you know, like I need to work on this or they need to work on that.
I think those are also great. And I just want to like especially underline the first point you said, which I think is going to come up, I'll mention in response to some other questions as well. But just, I have this concept called levels of yes, you know, that certain things in life, many things in life, but relationships are one of them, can be certain levels of yes. It could be like a very slight yes. It could be a really solid yes. It can be a hell yes. So I think I just felt curious reading this question, like how much of a yes any given relationship is for this person. I think sometimes, I don't know. I wonder, like, are you really having regrets when you're leaving these relationships? Were you really that into those people? So just another question to be asking yourself. I think there can often be this, you know, focus on, yes, I'm in this relationship and someone likes me, and there's a lot to like about them. They're good people, but it's like, that can all be true. They can be lovely people. That you can have a lot of shared values and good times together. But like, is it really a strong yes for you? And is the level of yes acceptable to you?
Yeah, totally agree. Just one last quick thought is that I feel like we talk a lot about having deep conversations and working out all these complex, vulnerable issues and everything. If that seems like whoa, that's like way too much. Like I'm just trying to date and whatever. I totally get that. There's a social etiquette to these things.
Yeah.
There's a levels of intimacy that have to build, and that takes time and everything. But I also think a lot of times people think the relationship is something outside of their lives. It's just something you show up to, like at a party, as opposed to being an integral part of your life and like a way of approaching knowing yourself and a way of discovering who you are. And if you treat your relationships, or if you treat your dating life like something that you're just going to do casually, again, it's totally fine to be casual, but just understand the potential is much, much bigger than that. And if you're not approaching it with that potential in mind, you're going to be kind of swimming in the shallows. You're never really going to get probably what you most want out of it, which is to be seen and to be, you know, deeply bonded to another person.
And I will say to your point, Gil, too, like if you're somebody who's not used to having those kinds of conversations, this will be a skill that you're going to build over time.
It is a skill,
and it's going to feel really scary the first time you do it. You're going to be like, I am really intense, or they're going to be really upset. And some people can take it and some people can't. But many people who, you know, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have some depth and thoughtfulness. So somebody you would really want to date could probably work on it over time.
Yeah. Well, and if that is something they want, like, it's important to know that they're with a person who can't take it. And if that person can't take it, I mean, it's sad and it's hard, but like, better to know now than later.
Could not agree more.
Because people are not going to change, and you need to give them the prompt to ask themselves, do I want to still be with this person who's making me think all these deep things? If they don't, then good for them. They get to go move on to some other shallower relationship, and you get to move on and find someone who's deeper.
I love it. Okay, Gil, you are doing so well. I think you should lead off our next question because I think you have so much to say. I think you should go next. Okay, so the next question is from M. It's about a date who moves at a different pace. And this person said, "Hi, Katie. I reconnected. Previously, this person had went out twice, but they ended it with someone from a dating app, and went on a couple of dates recently. So they had gone out and then they ended it and then they went on a couple of dates again recently. I find this person somewhat interesting and he has some of the qualities I was hoping for in a partner. He has been making comments and reaching out in a way that feels too fast too soon, as if skipping over the getting to know you stage and moving to the boyfriend stage without even realizing it. It doesn't seem like it's coming from a bad place, but an overeager and excited place. I am easily scared off and I'm trying to be more open and communicative in dating. Is there a kind way of asking someone to slow down without dampening their enthusiasm? I've never been able to strike the balance between pacing things in the beginning with pacing things in the beginning of dating.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of things I don't know about this person's dating history. And like, for example, what does it mean to strike a good balance with pacing things? Because has she gone too fast in the past and scared someone away? Or is the problem that she's gone too slow and sort of someone left? I'm going to kind of go through, I wrote down some thoughts here. One thing I would say is if in the past you feel like you've gone too slow and someone lost interest, guys will work hard and want to work hard for someone they value. So if you felt like you went too slow and the guy lost interest, like it wasn't going to happen anyway. So don't worry about that. Like guys want to work hard for someone they value. If you feel like you've gone too fast and you've pushed someone else away, I definitely think that can happen. I have done that in the past. And there is an element where some people just really need to learn how to pace themselves when they get into relationships really quickly and just fall in love very quickly. There is sort of, I think, a natural temperament to it as well. Like, I think I was always someone who wanted to like kind of rush into things. And I kind of really couldn't change that about myself. But the partner could slow things down. In fact, that's what happened with you and I.
I was wondering if you were going to tell that story. Yeah.
And I will get back to the original question, but as a sort of instructional aside, hopefully, you, Katie, were going through a lot of heavy changes in your life about who you were and what you wanted. And I was maybe a little bit more settled into some of those questions, but I hadn't had a lot of long-term relationship experience. I'd kind of gone from a lot of like very brief, very intense relationships, then went a few years and then met somebody else. And so I didn't have a lot of experience in sort of just the stability of being in a relationship long-term. And plus I'd gotten broken up with in a very painful way. And so one of the ways that manifested is I was like always looking for a sense of like security, right? We started dating, we had a strong connection, but you were needing a lot of alone time. And no matter how many times you told me, this is not about you, Gil, I'm going through a period in my life where I need to be alone a lot. So like sometimes we would meet up for a date and we'd spend part of the day together and then suddenly you'd be like, I'm sorry, I think I need to be alone for the rest of the day or the rest of the weekend. And no matter how many times he told me it wasn't about me, I just took it really personally because I had like this wound that like I wanted to feel like you weren't going to pull the rug out from under me. I was like terrified that I was investing all this emotional energy and you were just going to pull out the rug from under me and then suddenly like leave and abandon me. And so that's obviously something I needed to work on. And this actually harkens back to an earlier question too about when do you know you should break up with someone, because I also thought, I might need to like break up with you because I really didn't feel safe. I had so much anxiety. But I knew that I liked you and I felt that you did respect boundaries. You just sometimes had needs that were different from mine. You needed to be alone and I needed connection. And so I was moving way too fast for your taste.
And I would also say, just in the spirit of the point you're making, I think is a great one. And that's sort of like the overall arc of the first, like, especially like 6 months of us together.
Yeah.
But I remember
really the whole first year,
maybe the first year, but literally on the second date we had, and we were like, talking on the phone and we had done some texting as well. But like literally on our second date, I remember we were in Brooklyn. I think we were at like a Thai restaurant near your apartment. And I remember having a conversation where I was sort of like, I really like you, but I need us to take it a little slower.
Yeah.
Like I had a very specific conversation, which to me echoes sort of what this person is saying. And I know that was like, I know that it was a little hard for you to hear, but I also I knew that I liked you a lot. And you just had a very different like way of being in an early relationship than most men I had even been with. Like you were just like sort of willing to be in communication basically almost every day from the time we initially met. And I was just sort of like...
Right. I wanted to talk on the phone every day and you were kind of surprised by that.
Yeah. So on one hand, I want to name to this person, like, I think it's totally fine for you to ask for what you want, and it can be done from a place of kindness, and you can be open, which I think is also sort of what Gil's saying, to like, what the other person is needing too, because there were also some times early in our relationship where you were sort of like, also I would like for us to talk every day, and I would like for you to call me Katie.
Right. And to be clear, that was a request. It wasn't a demand or blackmail or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly, that hadn't even occurred to me. I'd never been in a relationship where we like talked quite that frequently.
Right. And you ended up loving it.
I ended up loving it, let's be real. But so I think there could be sort of like, I don't think he needs to be your boyfriend if you're not comfortable with that. And I think you can be very explicit about that. And you can also be open to like, what does he need as well?
Right. So I wanted to give that long introduction to say that, because I also think there's a pattern sometimes with women where women are so used to men being sort of coy and being like, maybe I'll call you or whatever, that when they meet someone who is very interested and is very open, like, I really like you, I want to do things with you, spend time with you, they sometimes can be turned off or just feel a little bit unnerved, like, I don't know, why is this guy so like intense?
That's a great point.
But so I wanted to put that out there. Having said all of that, I absolutely applaud this person knowing their boundaries, recognizing I don't feel comfortable with how fast this is going. I absolutely encourage this person to talk to the person about it. And here's the thing, you can't prevent someone's feelings from being hurt, right? You could say everything in the kindest possible way and their feelings might still be hurt, and that's not your fault and that's not within your control. You just need to be authentic and honest about how you feel, and you should definitely tell them how you feel. I don't know enough about this relationship to even guess whether this person is like a good match or not. I mean, it sounds like you're kind of lukewarm towards them.
I was going to say the same thing.
Because you said, I find this person somewhat interesting. And he has some of the qualities. I mean, there's no partner that has absolutely everything you're looking for. But so I wanted to both present the side of sometimes people will surprise you, and you just need to know that some men are very like different and will show interest intensely. It doesn't mean they're weird or scary. Having said that, it's also totally reasonable that maybe you're not that into them, and maybe you just don't know and you're confused. And it's totally legitimate to say, hey, I'm sorry. I just want to figure out how I feel. That's totally legitimate, and I applaud that. And even if it is a person that you decide, no, this person is really, I think they're important, I really want to invest into this relationship, they may still need to work on boundaries, or they may still need to like work on some emotional issues they may have. So don't be afraid to be like, I have these boundaries, and just because now at this point we're now boyfriend, girlfriend, or just not because we now have this relationship doesn't mean that you get to dictate exactly how everything goes. Like, I still have these needs for space, for time, for alone time, whatever it is. So it's not so much a direct answer to what she asked, but more how, I think people can think about it.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. Yeah, high level. You can always ask for what you want in a kind way, and, be thoughtful about the other person's feelings, and try to get both people's needs met.
Yeah. And I think this is true for every case, that it's always a good idea to know your boundaries and to enforce them. I think women in general, we make gendered assumptions here sometimes, I think women in general can always benefit from being stronger about boundaries.
I like that invitation. Okay, so question number 3, just so I don't put you on the spot every time, maybe we'll alternate.
Yeah.
Okay. You were signaling that to me anyway. I like that. Okay, so the third question is from, this is, I guess, the fourth. So from Shayna. The summary is, if I don't feel butterflies, should I move on? Shayna says, I recently went on a second date with a very nice person. The conversation flowed well, and we seemed to have similar values and wants. She's interesting and kind. At the end of the date, we kissed. I enjoyed kissing her. I forgot how nice kissing is, but I didn't feel anything. No excitement, no butterflies. Kissing is nice was the extent of my feelings. My question is, do I go on a few more dates to see if something develops, or do I end it because I don't feel attraction and the excitement I want to feel? Okay, so like the gut instinct for me is sort of like, if you have to ask, it's probably a no in terms of a long-term, meaningful life partner, let's just say. There's probably, I think, going to be some sort of intuitive like interest or pull or sense of like wanting to be with them more, even if you struggle to put that in words, though I'll talk more about that in a second. So that's just like the gut instinct, like probably. But the second answer to that is, again, like levels of yes. And to know your level and to like your level. Like, I think, there could be someone who's just like a very slight yes, which it sort of sounds like this person is. And that could be good enough in this season, because maybe you just want to like spend some time with some pleasant people who you enjoy kissing. And that's where you're at in this season of life, and that's okay. Or you're sort of tired of being alone. for so long. And so you want to spend some time with some nice people while you're sort of dating broadly. I'm cool with that, no problem. Or like maybe your level is like a moderate yes in this season of life because like whatever, you're not ready to get serious, you want to meet all kinds of people, who knows? I think all of those are fine as long as you know your reason and you like your reason for your level of yes. It's just always about knowing that, because at some point, most people will want a more serious partnership. And where I see it more of a problem is people sort of never explicitly name to themselves that they've accepted like a lower level of yes. And they're sort of like, oh, but this person is great. Like, shouldn't I want them? And it's like, actually, this partner isn't what you're most wanting. So it's useful to sort of define for yourself in your own mind what that is and to know that you are accepting a lower level and sort of being okay with that.
Yep, totally agree. I think also I always like to bring in, just be honest with the other person. You know,
yeah.
Don't pretend to feel something you don't for the other person's sake. It's always much more kind to be honest earlier. Or if you don't know, just say you don't know. But yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Yeah, except just to say, like, I think attraction is a floor. It's not enough to sustain a relationship, but like it's kind of like a minimum, because otherwise it's just a friend, right? So if you don't feel some kind of a sense of attraction, which is, I'm calling the butterflies feeling sort of just a basic sense of attraction, it's probably just like, yeah, you're not that into them. And again, like you said, I think it's okay. You don't have to be super into everyone you date, but also just be honest with yourself about what that means and what kind of relationship this is. And be honest with the other person. Don't pretend to be somewhere you're not, because, you know, that never leads to good things.
Yeah. I like your point about attraction too, Gil. And I just want to add, like, I think just because I think it can be interesting to hear other people's examples, because everybody wants something different when it comes to like a hell yes. But for me, a hell yes is obviously a physical attraction, but it's also like an emotional, spiritual, intellectual, I would call attraction. Like, I feel attracted to someone, to their way of being in the world, to the way in which they see me and support me. Like, so I think that there's like that physical attraction, like I want to you know, kiss you or be sexual or anything. But there's also, I would say there is an attraction. There's a sense of being drawn to someone on all those other levels too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good nuance, and I agree, because I think that feeling of butterflies that everyone can kind of relate to, it's not just physical, because there's people who are attractive that you may not have butterflies for. It's it's physical attraction plus some kind of chemistry, some kind of thing like, oh yeah, I want to be around you. And if that's missing, that's like a minimum. So if that's missing, it doesn't seem like there's much potential there. But yeah.
Okay. Cool. This next one is great. This is from Lucy. Lucy says, Lucy's high-level question is about her boyfriend who needs more recharge time than her, and it's frustrating. So Lucy says, hi, Katie. I'm not sure if this is a dating question or one more geared towards relationships, but since I've been dating my boyfriend and we have a question, I thought I'd shoot my shot. My boyfriend and I are in our early 30s. We've been together for about 3 years, and I just moved in with him about 5 months ago. We both work full-time. Me from home and him outside the house. And at the end of the day, I am so ready for him to come home and socialize because I've often been alone all day. When he comes home, he likes to take an hour or two, more often the latter, to himself and decompress from being around people all day. I'm trying to be patient, but it drives me absolutely nuts that my alone time extends until dinner. We've tried talking about this, and I just keep caving and say, it's okay, I understand, when really I just want to spend time with him or anyone after such a long day. I'm working on finding my own after-work hobbies, like taking a class or calling some friends, but I also feel like I shouldn't have to match his behavior just so I can keep busy until he's ready. He also stays up later than I do, meaning he gets bonus alone time when the night is done. So how do I either learn to accept this cool down time or discuss my frustration with him while being respectful about the time that he needs to decompress? Thank you.
Great question.
So good. Do you want to start us off, Gil?
Well, you and I relate to this somewhat. I don't know. She didn't really put it in terms of like whether he's introverted and she's extroverted.
Oh, it sounds like she said that she's an extrovert. And
Oh, okay.
it sounds like he's an introvert.
Okay, yeah, I sort of assumed that, but I wasn't totally sure. You and I have a kind of similar thing sometimes, except we're both introverted, and you also need a lot of alone time. But still, because you do work from home, I work outside the home in an office, and I'm also surrounded by people all day. So despite the fact that you also need a lot of alone time, we do often have this issue where, like, I come home, I immediately, I help you with the kids, putting them into bed. And then, usually it's time for dinner, and then you're talking, and, you have things you want to tell me about your day. And to be clear, vice versa, I also tell you about my day. But if I could just snap my fingers and have everything be the way I prefer it, I would have like an hour or two also to decompress from the day. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that I do think your boyfriend's needs are totally legitimate and real. It's not like he's just, I think, not wanting to deal with you, because I totally relate to that feeling of being just compressed from all that time spent at work and being around people and work problems and stress and problem solving. I also want to acknowledge that your feelings are very real and your boundaries are real and totally legitimate. Like, you need connection, right? That's why we're in relationships. We want to have enough time connected. I don't know to what extent this is just a logistical issue, because if you feel like the relationship otherwise feels good to you, like, for example, when he is with you, the quality of his presence is good, then this is probably a logistical issue. And, I have some ideas about that. But if you feel like even when he's with you, like he's maybe not paying attention or doesn't make you feel heard, that's, I think, a different problem that probably should be addressed on its own and before you get into the logistics too much. But let's just assume for now that his quality of presence is good when he's with you, and you do feel connected to him. These are just some compromises off the top of my head. Maybe when he first comes home, he can just have half an hour to decompress for that little bit, and then he can give you a little bit of extra time before dinner. Then you have dinner, and then afterward he takes whatever time he wants. Or maybe you guys can get up in the morning and spend some time together, like half an hour every morning, to have that time, so you get that to feel the connection. And, hopefully in the morning he's more decompressed and feeling calmer. I think there's actually a lot of room for different types of compromises. I don't think there's one right answer. And it probably will always be true, unless your work situation changes significantly, that he's always going to feel more tired and wanting to relax, and you're going to feel more like hungry for socialization. Obviously, she's already mentioned trying to get hobbies and things. She might also try taking a 2-hour break in the middle of the day, if that's available to her, to socialize like smack in the middle of the day,
that's what I was thinking,
to get her needs met that way she's had like a nice little chunk, and then finishes her work later. And maybe that actually takes her to finish her work later, and her husband or boyfriend has been home for an hour or so while she's finishing her work. So then he gets time alone, and so I don't think it matters so much what compromise you come up with, but he's probably always going to feel like he'd like more alone time, and she's probably always going to feel like she wants more together time. But I think it can be figured out, assuming there aren't other underlying issues of where I think the quality of attention matters more than the amount of time.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, but I just want to say, I want to acknowledge it is tough because they both have completely legitimate needs.
I think that's a great point. And they're just like, it's a divide that has to be managed versus it ever being perfect. I agree with everything you said. I felt curious about it. I agree that like a conversation about possibility where you sort of explicitly name that this is something you want and sort of, explore lots of possibilities, like Gil said, I think is great. I had a curiosity too about whether it would be useful to explicitly plan what it would be. So, and maybe it's different on different nights. Like maybe there's one night a week where he has total free introvert rest time, where he doesn't talk to you at all till 9 p.m. And maybe another 2 nights where you do this half-hour thing and then you check in, and then maybe a third. Like, I think it would also help me to know what it's going to be. Like I sensed from the thing that Lucy wrote in that it can be frustrating to feel like it'll be some amount of time. It might be an hour. It might be 2. Like, I don't know when I'm going to see him.
That's a great point.
And I'm really lonely. Mm-hmm. If you guys literally, either it's like the same every week, or at least before he gets home, he's told you what it's going to be. And there's a certain amount of things you get per week and a certain amount he gets, I'm taking my intense rest day tonight because it was a really tough day, and that's fine because it's only once a week. Just so you know intellectually what to expect. I think that can make it feel a lot better. And the third thing I'll say in terms of just the conversations with him was just like also curiosity about, I think you definitely do need your FaceTime with him because that's really important to your relationship, and I can tell that you're craving that. I just wonder if it could also just make it a little bit less urgent and softer if there were other ways in which you felt kind of valued and cherished and connected to him. Like, is there an opening for him to like make sure that he texts you or like sends you an email during the day, or like he gives you a call while he walks to lunch, or like just something so that you feel connected? I just felt like, would that help in some way as a possibility?
Yeah, I love it. I think your answer was better or more actionable than mine. Yeah, all those sound like great ideas. Yeah, I would just close with, sometimes it can be surprising to people when they're in relationships how much logistical discussions have to happen, but sometimes that is true.
Yeah,
like you and I have had a lot of discussions where I'm like, wow, I never thought that being in a relationship would require this much sort of planning. But sometimes it does.
Or so much planning. And like you will do this then, and then I will do this now.
Well, especially now with kids, obviously. But even for people without kids, again, when it's really hard and tough when people have unmet needs, and they both have legitimate but different unmet needs, or even opposite unmet needs. But I just want to say, if you feel like this is the person for you, and the person for you doesn't mean that they're perfect or everything's always easy, but if this is like the person for you that you really value and you feel like he values you, sometimes it does just take a lot of discussions and logistics and scheduling. And I think, Katie, I love what you said about making things really specific, like what to expect when, because it removes a lot of that anxiety about, oh, is this going to be a good night or a bad night, or, am I
going to be lonely?
Right, exactly.
And maybe there's, one night a week I get to pull a, like, I'm really lonely and sad, or I really want to talk card, or, like you each get something you get to pull.
Yeah.
I love all of that. The last thing I wanted to say about this, though, is honestly not even about dating. It's just for like humans in general, because so many of us are working from home now. And I think it's hard for anyone. I mean, I am just a mega introvert, and even for me, I can be home and alone too much. But for an extrovert, I think you really need to take that state where you are working from home and alone all day very, very seriously. Mm-hmm. And I hear you. It totally sounds like you are like working on finding your own after work hobbies, like taking a class or calling some friends. But I just want to urge you, like, this could be a really serious well-being issue for you. Like extroverts working from home can really be a serious problem. And I think, I don't mean to like make it a crisis. I'm just saying, like, take it really seriously. Like, I have some clients who have found other friends who also work from home, and they have co-working that they do a couple of times a week. Or, do you have the funds to invest in a co-working space? Honestly, I try to go to the library a couple of times a week for a couple of hours. That's free, and it of course depends on your work style. And if you're obviously probably can't take like conference calls at the library, but Gil's point of like, can you take a break in the middle of the day? I try to have sort of regularly scheduled friend hangouts with different friends at different points in the month. So I just think like taking the fact that you are an extrovert who works from home, even independent of this relationship issue, really, really, really seriously, I think would behoove you as well. And of course, talk to your boyfriend, everything we've said. But like, I think there's more opening for you to treat that with the sort of the real mental health challenge that it has the potential to be.
Yeah. I think it's definitely 50-50 thing. It's one of those scenarios that sounds like he needs to also work on how he can show up more for her in ways that like are, still respect his boundaries.
Yeah.
And she also needs to do the same in the ways that you suggested. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay. So the next question was from JB. And JB says, what are some ways to identify what might be a dating blind spot for yourself? Well, being on apps, I've decided to not go on third or fourth dates for some pretty specific reasons that I've been so tempted to tell the person. And it makes me curious what the people I go on dates with wish they could tell me. I've been asking my friends for opinions, hot takes, or advice about how I show up in a romantic context, or to people I'm attracted to, or patterns they see in who I go out with. Any advice on how to get more feedback within the dating process without making someone uncomfortable or seeming like a personal optimization weirdo? So I guess my first point about this is just sort of like, yeah, I think you can totally ask. Like the first thing I would say is I don't think that there's anything wrong with asking. I don't think it's weird to be curious about that information. I don't think everyone will feel comfortable giving it. I think you can ask kindly, but I think no matter how you ask, a lot of people aren't going to tell you. But here's the sort of like second piece, which comes in pretty quickly about that. I think that most of the feedback you would get, even if you got every single person to give you feedback about why they didn't want to continue seeing you, I think only a small percentage of it would be like objectively something that is wrong or bad or that you would want to change about yourself. I think the majority of it would fall under the category of you can be the most delicious peach in the world, but not everybody likes peaches.
100%.
And that's actually, I got that particular phrase from a coach named Brooke Castillo, and I just love it. I just think it's so funny. Actually, literally one of my first people who I went on a couple of dates with online, maybe the only person I went on a couple of dates with who I met online before Gil, and then period, because I only started online dating a couple months before I met Gil. I think we were on like maybe our second date, and I was sort of like, oh yeah, I'm kind of interested in you. And it sort of like wasn't going anywhere. And I was sort of like, I wonder why like he's not trying to kiss me or like nothing's happening. And I actually asked him, and he revealed that he wasn't attracted to me. And that I kind of reminded him of his sister. And
Yikes.
I know, isn't that like sort of upsetting? And I remember feeling kind of hurt by that. And I could have taken away from that, like, oh, maybe I'm just not attractive, or no, people don't like me or whatever. Like I need to be more beautiful in some other way, or mysterious or exciting in some other way. But like, he just didn't like the peach that I was, you know, like I'm just not for him. So I just think, I think it takes an enormous amount of discernment and wisdom and emotional detachment to be able to separate it. And I sort of worry that you might even get so much feedback that's just not true about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, per usual, I agree with everything you said. I think, first of all, most people are not going to be honest because, like, you know, most people don't want to hurt someone else's feelings, especially a stranger they just met. So I don't think it's that useful. Also, yeah, I think 90 to 99% of the reason most people don't want to keep going out with someone is some variation of I'm not attracted to you. Now, sometimes it could just be physical attractiveness, but sometimes it could just be like, I don't know, you remind me of my ex who I hate, or like, I don't like your hair. Didn't someone tell you they didn't like short hair?
Maybe that was part of it. So I had shaved my head maybe like before I met that guy, maybe it was like 4 months. It was very, very short at that time. And it was very short when I met Gil. I had like a real little pixie. So yeah, not everyone liked that, I think.
Right. So yeah, again, if you could manage to get honest feedback, which I think is very doubtful, it would probably be not that useful because it's nothing really you need to or should change about yourself. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking. I think it could be a fun icebreaker. It could just be something that makes you seem quirky in a good way. So there's nothing wrong with asking. But longer term, I think I'm more curious into like, why are you not into people? Why do you decide to like keep dating someone versus another person? Because I think once you get clear on why you're choosing one person or another person, first of all, you're going to start to choose who you date much more carefully. You're going to have a more discerning taste, and you're going to be looking for more subtle things. And then naturally, as you're dating people for more nuanced reasons or with a deeper understanding of why you're spending time with that person, it's also going to be more clear why it may not work out, right? So if you're like, oh yeah, this guy seemed really deep, but actually he's kind of melancholy and depressed, and it seems like he's got issues to work out that like I can't really fully support him on, either because I have my own stuff or because like I'm kind of cleaned up already and he needs to do some cleaning up on his own and he's not ready for a relationship, right? When you can have those more nuanced appraisals of why something isn't working out, it becomes more and more irrelevant why someone's not interested in you. And just as a quick example, before I met Katie a couple of years before, I very briefly dated someone for like a month. We went out on a couple of dates and I was really into this person. Just, you know, they were attractive and, you know, I thought they were interesting and this and that. but I could sort of feel that I was much more into them than they were into me. And I tried to talk to her about it, and I was like, look, I'll be honest, I'm probably a little bit intense. I tend to come on strong, so I totally get that you might want to move more slowly, but also, I don't know, it doesn't seem like you're that into me. Is it me personally, or is it something that's going on for you? Do you have trouble with relationships and whatever? And basically the answer was always some version of like, no, it's fine. We're dating. I'm enjoying this. I'm just, there's nothing wrong. And that was totally fine. But here's the thing. I needed somebody who was more into me than she was, and I needed someone who's going to be very affectionate and demonstrate affection, just with like hugging or kissing or caresses or whatever it was, or just like emotionally would make me feel more like they cared. And I know it was only a month and it was early in the dating, but there was just a certain presence that wasn't there, and that was important to me. And so in hindsight, I still don't really know what it was, but she just wasn't into me. And it wasn't my job to figure out what trauma might possibly be affecting her ability to be in a relationship with me or whatever, because there might not have been any trauma. She just wasn't into me. And if there had been trauma, I gave her a chance to talk about it, and she didn't give me anything like that to work with. So it was very like hard and sad for me, but I was like, you know what? I really like you, but it just doesn't seem like this is going anywhere, and I don't feel good. And so, we broke up, and, she also saw the wisdom in that because, she knew it wasn't going anywhere. So to me, I'm much less interested in why people might not be wanting to go out with you. And I'm much more interested, and I think it's more useful for you to figure out what do you want and why do you choose to, one person over another. I think that's a more useful lifelong path.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the curiosity, this person doesn't go into it, but it's sort of like, are you finding yourself in a lot of situations where you're really into someone and then they're not into you? That would be the only thing I'm curious about. And if that's the case, I don't know. This is also because I'm a coach, but I'm sort of like, do you need a coach or like a therapist or somebody to sort of like talk through it with? Because I think there might be things that you're missing about yourself, but you might not get them from those
Maybe
people.
There is some blind spot.
Yeah. But I think, make sure that you like them first. This is a great first rule of thumb. Okay, then I think this is actually our last question. So this is a long one, so I'm going to read part of it, and then we may refer to other parts of it in the question. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read quite a bit. The high-level question is, and this is from Alice, the high-level question is, how do I come to terms with my feelings of insecurity when measuring myself, in spite of my attempts not to, against a somewhat spectacular ex whose existence was a defining and long-term love story in my boyfriend's life?
And I think it might be good to not get into too many details, both because there's a lot and also, I got the sense the person was a little bit cagey about sharing so much.
I think they said it was okay as long as we do it with the pseudonym, which this is.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah, and by the way, I thought I really liked everything she wrote. It was really heartfelt, and I really like that she shared all this stuff, and she seems very self-aware. But go ahead.
Okay. Do you think it's okay? I think it's okay. I think she said as long as it's with pseudonym, and this is Alice's pseudonym. Mm-hmm. Okay. So she says, I am a woman dating a man who was previously in a 7-year relationship. For all I know, he's relieved to not be in that relationship anymore. But I sometimes feel insecure about the fact that my boyfriend of now a year plus was clearly committed to someone else for so long. My boyfriend seems very committed to me, and I like him a great deal and have hopes for this relationship. I also know what it is to have loved someone a lot. I had a 4-year relationship that I left, and not to miss that person because the relationship wasn't right. As for the ex-girlfriend, it sounds like they were ultimately mismatched, and for all, my boyfriend rarely talks about her and has never spoken about her with spite. He did quietly explain that she had a temper and was sometimes violent. It sounds rather sad, to be honest. She was no doubt dealing with her own demons as well. He tried for a long time to make their relationship work because they clearly had chemistry and some good times together, but it was also a very tumultuous relationship that turned abusive and left my boyfriend extremely shaken. And then I'll just read this last paragraph. She says, it's a long preamble, however. How does one deal with feelings of insecurity when measuring themselves, even when they don't want to, against the ghost of a current partner's ex? In this case, I never knew the woman in question, but I have seen a few photos and I know enough to be aware that she was very painfully beautiful, exceedingly intelligent, artistic, and simultaneously dramatic and fragile in a way that conveyed passion, if not a feeling of security. In the insecure part of my mind, she is Rebecca de Winter. Have you ever read Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca? I have.
I saw the movie. So I also get the movie.
I've read the book, and I'm the mousy second wife. I just love that that point. Okay, so we'll stop here. Mm-hmm. Do you want to start us off, Gil?
Yeah, I'll just say, again, I know it can be hard to sort of share your innermost thoughts about these things. I just want to really give kudos to this person. She really demonstrated a lot of self-awareness and just... there's parts of the letter where she's talking about how she doesn't want to like project these insecurities and like have them be the cause of discord with the partner. I think... my sense from what she said is that this sounds like a great relationship. It sounds like they do love each other. It sounds like they're both really interesting, cool people who are into each other. And my thoughts sort of presuppose that she feels safe in this relationship, and it does seem like the insecurities are more coming from her and not so much from any signals that he's giving her. And again, kudos for the awareness of that. I think she just needs to talk to him about it. I think the relationship, like I said earlier, we need to test the relationship to see how much it can hold. And given how much she already said, she's aware that she doesn't want to like cause discord, and she's aware that it's coming from her. She seems self-aware enough to really just actually lean on the relationship more and to lean on her boyfriend more and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is how I feel. And it's funny because on one hand, it sounds like she wants to be this ideal of this ex who is like maybe mysterious and like maybe a little bit remote and like unreachable or untouchable. And she's probably like, I think I'm really cool and interesting and attractive and all these things, but I'm also me and I have insecurities and I have these feelings. And like, I think she believes that if she shares these vulnerabilities, that the spell will break and that he'll suddenly see her for being this like vulnerable human being that she actually is, and that somehow he won't like her anymore. Maybe now I'm projecting, but that's kind of the vibe I got. And I feel like she just needs to take that chance because it sounds like she wants a relationship where she can fully show up as herself. And it sounds like this guy could be it, but she won't know that until she like trusts him enough to say, hey, I know this is my thing, and I know I'm probably just, turning this over in my head and wasting time on it, but this is how I feel. And like, maybe she even needs to say, I need assurance from you. I need to know that you're really over this person, or I need to know that you don't feel like you're settling. And then the last point I'll make is, I think there is a phase of life or a certain level of maturity in relationships where like all we want is that crazy feeling of like passion and attractiveness and things like that. And like, Heathcliff and what's her name that sort of had that? Am I thinking of Jane? No, not Jane Eyre.
It's the other Bronte. It's Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, right. She's roaming the moors and, grieving for Heathcliff's, and feeling spurned by him. And I think that can be very addictive and that can seem like the ideal of love. I think that's actually an immature vision of love. And it can seem like the people who have these super dramatic relationships with a lot of ups and downs are more interesting somehow. I disagree. I think I actually remember telling you this when we were dating the first year or two, that I loved that I felt safe in the relationship and I loved the feeling of just like stability. And that felt like a deeper, more expansive type of love.
Yeah, just to be explicit, you would say like, I'm so glad we're past the like...
Oh yeah, right. Because that first year was a lot of ups and downs, mostly due to, my own stuff and then conflicting with your stuff. Yeah. And I really didn't know if we were going to make it after that first year, but we did. And then eventually I actually began to relax into the relationship and it felt great. But I also think our relationship needed to be tested, especially in that first year. You had to figure out a lot of boundaries and I had to figure out, could I be safe in the relationship? So I think she just needs to talk to this guy and she needs to take the relationship to the next level by talking to this guy and testing some of these fears and hopefully finding out that he is there for her and this is what he wants. And he may have his own fears that she's not even aware of because he may not be sharing them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That was the first thing I had written down of like, she sort of makes a reference in her question that her boyfriend rarely talks about her, the previous girlfriend, for example. So that makes me feel like, oh.
She really gave me the sense that he's not like hung up on this person.
Well, but also that they haven't talked about the previous girlfriend that much. She hasn't really brought it up. She's sort of rarely seen photos. Okay. So I sort of get the sense that she's kind of holding herself back.
You're making a different point, right? Yeah.
From talking about it too much. And I think if there's a yearning to talk about it, like talk about it. Even just your jealousy or insecurity can be something that is seen by you and by your boyfriend. So that's like the relational point for me. I also had a couple of points that just like Katie, the life coach, can't help but say. And the biggest one here is sort of like, I get a little whiff in this of like, this other girlfriend was so fabulous. Like she's beautiful and she's intellectual and she's dramatic and she's so interesting and she's enigmatic, and like you valuing that maybe more than you. So to me, there's an opening for you to sell yourself on you. And actually this person spends quite a bit of time also acknowledging the ways in which she is wonderful. And I often find this in my clients, like people who have fears or anxieties, but they also can articulate the opposite side, and they know in some part of them that it's not true. It's not like you have no sense of your own worth at all, Alice. You actually are quite aware of the many ways in which you are quite wonderful. And I would say you sound very wonderful based on sort of everything I could hear from you. But like, to me, I'm just like, I think I want you to be sold on you in your heart of hearts, and that it's much less about what the boyfriend might think or what people as a society might think. Like maybe they do think that she's cooler, but like to me, I want you to know in your soul, like, yeah, I actually think I'm pretty cool. Like I would want to date me. I would want you to have access to the answer to the question of like, would I rather date me or her? And if the answer is you, then I think you should be really crystal clear on that. And I want to be really actually specific about this. I think I talk a lot in very granular terms in my coaching practice, like with my clients one-on-one, about like how to change beliefs. And I think it requires more work than most people believe. Most people are like 25% sold or like a third sold on a new idea, but they don't get themselves farther because they don't actually like do the work. And doing the work literally means like sitting down with a piece of paper, writing down like all of your thoughts about her, for example. Like she's more enigmatic than me, she's more interesting, she's more beautiful, other people like her better, whatever they are. And then tackling each of those thoughts one by one and deciding whether you believe them and whether you actually think they're true. Like, is she actually more beautiful than me? If she's more beautiful than me, does that make her better than me? Does that make her more worthy of being dated than me? And the key to this is you don't just do this once. You do this like every day for 2 weeks. Like, I really mean that if you actually want to move your beliefs and you work on new beliefs, like, you may not necessarily believe, oh, I'm better than her. Because maybe you don't want to believe that, or maybe that's just not believable to you. I'm not saying you have to put her down in order to raise you up. You might just work on the belief, like, I believe it's possible that lots of people might want to date someone like me. Or I believe it's possible that some people might want to date someone like me. So I just I want to be like, I'm sure I'll do like a whole other episode of like how to change beliefs, but like you actually do want to work on this belief, because I want you to believe that you're worthwhile and to have all those neural connections just like much more easily accessible. And this is something that does respond well to practice if it's actually a belief that's causing you pain. So I'll say that first. The second point I wanted to make on just like the you side of things was also, you sort of say that you said, I myself know that I only feel insecure about this aspect of his past when I myself feel anxious about anything, my own looks, my career, my relationship, my prospects, anything. So you know that you tend to get anxious about this when you're just anxious in your life in general. And like, I just want to invite you to like really lean into that. Like if there's a way to sort of say, oh, this is my mental habit, like this is where my brain goes when I'm nervous about my career. It goes to like, maybe my partner doesn't like me because I'm not as like dramatically beautiful as his previous girlfriend. I think there can be a way in which you can just sort of name to yourself like, oh, my brain does this. Like my brain, for example, in my business has certain areas that it just gets like just sort of like always defaults to. Like when I'm anxious about something, it like always thinks that these specific areas are wrong in this specific way. And I have to like, Gil's laughing because he's observed this at dinner time. I'm anxious about things. And I have to sort of notice like, okay, this is my pattern. And if I'm getting anxious about this particular thing, there's like an 85% chance that this is not actually a problem. That mostly it's not. And so I have to sort of have the capacity to separate myself from my thoughts, to notice that pattern and to say, if my brain has gone down this pattern, experience has shown me that I'm often mistaken. And for me, it can often be really helpful to then say, I'm not going to even like adjudicate this right now. I was just saying this to Gil about something I was anxious about, I think like last week. Like I'm even going to wait till tomorrow when I'm less triggered, and I'm going to evaluate whether it's true that this is actually a problem. I'm going to evaluate whether it's true that this other girlfriend was way better than me, for example. And then the third thing that came up to me in terms of you was just sort of this sense of like, just even you calling yourself like the mousy second wife, and she's this sort of like fragile, dramatic previous girlfriend. Like, is there a yearning within you towards something else that's a little different than you are now? Like, is there a yearning towards wildness, was I wrote down? Like, is there a yearning towards allowing yourself to be dramatic at times? Like, do you feel like you're always trying to be like the nice person or the sensitive to other feelings person? I'm not saying those aren't like wonderful qualities, but I think sometimes letting yourself let those other areas of yourself out, like leaning into a sense of wildness, I don't know, in all kinds of ways. I have all sorts of ideas, but it's like hard to know exactly for you. Can also be that, like, do you want to channel more of that? Is that something you yearn for, but you feel like you're not allowed to be that, to be dramatic or whatever it is? So anyway, those were...
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this question is the one where I felt the most like I don't disagree with anything you said. I think we're looking at it from different perspectives.
Yeah.
So you're really looking at like sort of her side of the fence, which is all about how things she can do, which is really great. I was thinking about it, and I'm not saying this is better. It's just I was thinking about it from the perspective of the relationship. But no, I agree with everything you said. I think I'll just go back to saying that within the context of relationships, I think a relationship is sort of like a laboratory that tells you a lot about yourself. It tells you a lot about how you see the world. And don't be afraid to use it. Like, test the relationship and test how much it can take and how much it can hold, while acknowledging the things you're bringing to it and how you have a responsibility to, fix certain things yourself. But yeah, interesting perspectives.
Oh, I love it. Well, this concludes our episode. This is probably my longest podcast episode yet. I hope this was helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send them to me on Instagram. Send me an email. Yeah, thank you to our very special guest.
Thank you, Boo.
I love.
It was a pleasure, and maybe we'll do one of these another day.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Love you, Boo.
Love you, Boo.
If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.